Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have YuruKill, a fascinating blend of visual novels and shoot 'em ups. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Izanagi Games, YuruKill released in Japan in May of 2022 for the Nintendo Switch, the PlayStation 4, and the PlayStation 5. So if this is a title that is interesting to you, but you don't want to import it, you don't have long to wait, as the North American release is scheduled for July 5th. So what kind of title is YuruKill? So as I mentioned at the beginning of the intro, this title blends visual novels and shoot 'em ups in a way that I haven't really seen in the past, so it does make it quite unique. The game does have a rather darker story tone to it, so one of the ones I can kind of draw a comparison to is Danganronpa. If that kind of darker story is something that interests you and you enjoy visual novels, and you like shoot 'em ups, then this is a title that I think you should try. If you're mainly here for the shoot 'em ups and you're not really interested in visual novels and all the words that are present there, then this is probably one that you should avoid, as I'm not sure this would be a title that would be overall enjoyable to you. So the pedigree for the shoot 'em ups is decent. It's the shoot 'em up side is handled by G-Rev, but that said, it's the weaker part of the game. YuruKill would probably best be described as 2 parts visual novel / puzzler and 1 part shoot 'em up. But really, you don't even have to take my word for it. If you're interested in checking out the game, there is a demo that's available right now on the Japanese eShop, and that demo is also multilingual, so you can try out the game and determine if this is something that interests you. But that said, let's take a look at the game as well. You can kind of make an idea based off of what you see here. So when you begin the game, we're taken to the screen here. The main meat of the game is the main story, but as you move through the game and you unlock the various chapters, the shoot 'em up stages associated with those will be available in Score Attack. And there's also some decent settings you can mess around with, though honestly, you're better off adjusting the settings once you're in the game itself. So selecting the main story, we're given the option to start a new game or continue. So if we were to start a new game, you're also given your difficulty selection: easy, normal, and hell. So if you choose easy or normal, you can adjust your difficulty. However, if you choose hell, then you'll be locked into the hell difficulty for the rest of your run. One thing that's nice about the game is it does have an autosave system, but you can also place your own saves throughout. So that'll go and throw us into the little tutorial section for the shoot 'em ups, and then we'll see more of the game with the visual novel element following after that. So jumping past the tutorial as well as the intro section of the game, we find ourselves in basically the first more or less escape room element that the visual novel part has to it. So here, you're tasked with looking around rooms and solving puzzles. The first room itself is relatively straightforward. We just talk to this robot and look around the room. But from there, we can find ourselves in other rooms of the game. And here, this room is the one that introduces us to our first puzzle. Well, one of the 2 rooms that introduces us to puzzles. So in this room, we've got these 2 cosmetic cases with face lotion. And initially, we can't do anything with the face lotion. But there's another clue that you'll find looking around the room. And ultimately, the puzzle here is you have to balance out the numbers between these 2 cases. A relatively simple puzzle, but the game does get significantly more difficult. If we were to jump to the other room in this very first intro section of the game, looking around this room a little bit, there's a section that we can interact with that's yet another puzzle. Basically, these DVDs and this cabinet underneath it, which is locked. So this puzzle is actually very simple to solve. Basically, you're just matching the color of the DVD cases with the colors of the bars beneath. So we have to just move the white one over this way, and the yellow, or rather the orange one, change it with the black one. Bam! We've like solved that puzzle. So really, this section here is the kind of the intro section where we're still being introduced to the elements of the game, and the puzzles themselves are quite simple. They do get more complex as the game moves on. And throughout the course of this visual novel puzzle section, escape room section, you're going to have this character interaction between these two characters. Basically, your characters, or well, the characters that we're experiencing the story with, are playing the role of prisoner and executioner, and I'll kind of let you use your imagination to determine how that interaction works. But it's overall, dark stories aren't my cup of tea, but I feel that this one's been done relatively well to the point that I've experienced the story. So here, solving that puzzle, we discovered this picture diary, and in order to advance through this part of the game, is a key element that we needed to find. So once we have the puzzle solved for this section, we'll move deeper and deeper through this amusement park attraction, and it ultimately leads to a shoot 'em up section. So really, the best way for me to show you that shoot 'em up section is not through the story itself, as that would be a little bit of a spoiler. And I was partially showing you this section here. It's not that much of a spoiler. It is available in the demo, so if you want to experience it for yourself, it's definitely possible. But the score attack, I feel, is the best way to show you the shoot 'em up element spoiler free. So we're going to hop back to the main menu, and from here we're going to choose the score attack mode. So before we dive in, I just want you to see awesome ship design here. We'll be seeing more of that one in just a second. You do have a couple options under the score attack. So practice, score attack, play all the stages, and there's also a high score section as well. So the high scores are online. You can compete against people worldwide, which with this kind of a title is definitely exciting. So that is one thing that does add a little bit of replayability and longevity to the shoot 'em up side. Selecting score attack, we're taken to this section here, which allows us to play any of the stages that we've unlocked. There's a total of 7 stages throughout the course of the game, so that's something to keep in mind. There are also 4 different characters, 4 different pilots that we can select, and each one has their own unique ship. So Sengoku is the first pilot that we play as. You might have seen him a little bit in the visual novel section that I was kind of just showing you the puzzle part for. And as it says here, there's a brief little description as well as the stats for the individual pilots and their ship. So his is really well balanced, and one of the things that's unique about them is their option types are all different, somewhat Gradius related. So for his, they orbit around the ship, providing additional firepower further out or further in if you choose to focus the firepower. In addition to that, each ship does come equipped with a couple other weapon types, which we'll get to once we dive into the game. So Futa here is listed as the more technical. His options can basically fire in any range around the ship itself. It says 360, but you're actually locked to the diagonals and the cardinals, so something to keep in mind. Gentoku here has a weaker shot. His is a really screen-filling spread, but to counter that, his shots just aren't very powerful. And then Hanaka has very classic follow type options, which allow her to really focus her firepower on the enemies. But most of the ships are actually relatively slow, with the exception of Futa. Even Sengoku's is a little on the slow side. So to initially show off the game, we'll start just with stage 1. This is the one you would also experience in the demo. Your difficulties can range from easy, normal, and hell. So easy is definitely on the easy side. I believe the goal here was to make the shoot 'em up accessible for those that wanted to experience more of the visual novel side of things. But for more experienced shoot 'em up players, I think normal is kind of about right, and hell's definitely doable with just a little bit of practice. Starting the game, we're going to dive in. So one thing that I can note, even though there are only 7 shoot 'em up stages throughout the course of the game, they're actually relatively lengthy, and if you're playing them in the story, they're broken up with these visual novel sections with the interactions between the different characters. So they actually take a fair bit of time to get through, even in Score Attack. The game itself does have some really awesome mech design, specifically in the ships themselves. The enemy fighters are relatively plain, and one thing I do feel is a little bit weak is the backgrounds aren't very inspiring throughout the course of the game. So as far as the mechanics are concerned, you have a primary shot, and you also have what's is referred to in the manuals as a charge shot. Calling it a charge shot is a relatively inaccurate name in my opinion. It's actually more of a focus attack. So when you're using your charge attack, so in the case of a Switch controller, your normal shot is A, and your charge shot, or for the purpose of this video, we'll refer to it as focus shot, is the B button. So what that does is it slows down your speed, and it will activate the special function of the options for the individual ship, or as the game refers to it as, the secondary attack module. So in the case of Gentoku's ship here, or sorry, Sengoku's ship here, you can see that his options swirl around. And when we use our focus shot, the options are pulled into the ship, focusing our fire in a much narrower range in front of us, thus allowing us to do significantly more damage to the enemies directly in front. So, in addition to those two abilities, you might have noticed that we're collecting these green items and even scores from the enemies that we defeat. So that's referred to as resources, and they build this outburst meter in the bottom left. That outburst meter serves several different functions. First, if you have it set to easy or normal difficulty, if the meter's over 20%, if you get hit, it will activate basically an auto bomb and save you a life. So after that, if at any point past 20%, you can also use it for the functions. Well, there we saw the auto bomb there. You can use it for the outburst shot, or you can use it for the outburst bomb. This little icon there I was picking up is the one-up. There's one-up in each of the 3 segments of the 7 stages. So each of the 7 stages are broken up into 3 sections, and that has largely to do with the story elements that are associated with the stages itself. But it still works really well in a context of just a straight-up score attack shoot 'em up. So here's our first boss encounter. We're fighting against the character Sayudina, who has some story history with the character that we're playing at the moment, Sengoku here. Though in Score Attack you can play with any of the characters, so that's a little less relevant. So each of the times you encounter the boss sections will usually be done in phases. So in this particular fight, you can see that we had one full life bar. Then there's the second life bar where there's the shield around the ship. So in the context of the main game, that's referred to as let's see, I can't remember the exact term, but basically like mind barrier. And when we destroy that, we enter this phase that's called the prejudice synapse. And it's basically a section where we have to present a piece of evidence to kind of like counter or change a particular opinion that the boss character we're fighting holds. So something that's a little bit more once again, it's like kind of a Danganronpa or even like a Phoenix Wright style is courtroom trial, cross-examination kind of thing. And in a lot of ways, that's the kind of what the purpose of the shoot 'em up is serving in the story. It's a really interesting mechanic to use. So that's our first boss fight. From here, we're actually still in stage 1. It just transitions us to a second part of the stage. And from there, we'll move through the stage, and there'll be yet another boss fight that kind of has about the same number of phases as the first time. And that one will take us to yet another Prejudice Synapse, and then we ultimately will end up in a third boss fight after going through the third section of the stage. And that one is a little bit different. It's something called a mind maze, where we're going through and combining together the different statements that have been kind of combined together in the game to ultimately form the story that or let's see, form our final arguments, as it were, against the character that we're fighting with, or in a better way to put it is maybe trying to convince. So there are some neat scoring mechanics that do involve the outburst, specifically the outburst shot, which we really haven't used. So once again, referencing the Switch controller here, the outburst bomb is on your left bump or left trigger. However, if we use our right, we get this outburst shot that doesn't use as much of the energy from our outburst gauge, but that's how we will ultimately get higher scores. It's usually best done if there's a lot of enemies on screen and you have a lot of meter. Each time you hit that, you'll see that there's a combo counter over on the left that's building up. If that combo meter exceeds 10, then you start getting score multipliers starting at 1.1, 1.2, and building up. That's how you would ultimately tackle a score attack in this game. You want to build that meter and the more enemies you can destroy, the more projectiles you can destroy with your outburst shot, the higher your multiplier will climb, and well, you'll get big points. And in addition to that, you'll also get big scores, and scores are also translated directly into resources for the outburst gauge. It's actually a pretty neat system. So we find ourselves fighting the second boss, and well, that's basically the shoot 'em up section of YuruKill served up for your enjoyment. There's a lot more depth to it than that. The stages themselves do have a little bit of a different flow depending on which character you're playing as, which stages you're playing as, and the boss fights themselves are generally well constructed, with so far Chapter 4 being the one that I've enjoyed the most from the ones that I've experienced. As far as minus flavors are concerned, well, I do feel that and this might possibly be an issue with the Switch version itself, but sometimes the gameplay just feels slow, with there being slowdown, or even some of the other fighters that you could potentially use just being a little bit too not clunky's not the, let's see, the right word, maybe pondering, as they just move around the field. It's just a little bit too slow of a shoot 'em up sometimes for one that's basically has these bullet hell elements. It's just interesting and mayhaps not the best design choice. There is also the issue that the game does have some rather large sections between the actual shoot 'em up action. So if you're here for the shoot 'em up action, this probably is a game that might be best passed, as you'll spend potentially a half hour or more between shoot 'em ups stages playing through the visual novel section. But on the plus side, so the boss fights are really well done, like ranging from some like relatively standard bullet hell patterns to some that are more unique. I do really like the various shoot 'em up, or rather the starfighter designs that they've used for the various pilot ships. And then there's just that unique mashup. A visual novel, shoot 'em up, like it's been done before, but just the way that they've put this one together is something that, at the very least, if you like visual novels and are a fan of shoot 'em ups, then give the demo a try and see if this is something for you, or if it's not something that you're into, then, well, there are definitely plenty of other shoot 'em ups out there to give some consideration to. So at the end of the day, this is a title that I myself have enjoyed, and I'm looking forward to finishing up and seeing how the story ultimately plays out. So if that's kind of the feeling that you would have enjoying a story that's a relatively good read and play, then yeah, I think this one is one that I can recommend to you. Otherwise, if the visual novel aspect isn't for you, then this is probably one that's a fairly safe pass. Alright, there you have it. YuruKill served up for your enjoyment. That'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time.
Disengaging virtual bottle seekers. Initiating safe mode override.